Hi Fred, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to carry your video a little bit. Just this inset video part now. I mean, it's not like I want to get into the habit of this, and I realize I've done it a couple times with Gary himself now and made these long videos. I don't want to do that, but I do think it can be productive. It's unfortunate that we duplicate each other's video when we do this in a way that means that if it went on very long, we just be watching the same video and a video and a video that we've already seen before. So it has its problems, but I think it can help also go down to the level of details that we're talking about.
In terms of feeling on the one side, and then something like calculation or signification or both, or some other more kind of logical, I guess, process on the other, more digital kind of process on the other. But I don't think feeling's right either. You know, it seems to me that feeling and thinking are very closely related concepts. And you can't really have thinking without it being shot through with feeling.
Okay, before you go on, because you make up a point that deserves its own consideration, but I think they're all feelings, and that thinking is just a particular kind of feeling. And I think that our forebrain evolved largely as a means to regulate feeling. And I'll leave it at that for a second.
And similarly, I don't think you can have this thing called feeling without it being heavily informed by thought. We kind of know that, don't we? Because we can change the way we feel about things by being educated or being, you know, just ruminating on a topic can change the way we think and feel about something. So we know that there's a...
See, I think that's what has led me to believe that thinking is not about like working with facts. It's about working with feelings. Thinking is processing feelings. It's an extra way, an extra level of abstraction and indirection with which you can edit your thoughts, or, you know, edit is a little too liberal, but you know what I mean, influence.
Like, feelings are the perceptions of bodily states. Feelings are the perceptions of bodily states.
See, I kind of like that, but again, we're going to get into how I think that goes along with what I believe about thinking and feeling. Because really, the main difference between what I think and that statement is that I make a distinction, a clear distinction between consciousness and self-consciousness. You're not merely conscious of the sun. You're self-conscious of yourself being conscious about the sun. You have an extra abstraction layer, and I believe the neurology does enable that because of this very real-time sensation that it can do. Okay, but it's different than just you can just experience the sun and not be thinking or conscious or experiencing a conception of yourself experiencing it, if you see what I mean.
It's something Antonio Damasio picks up again.
I guess my point is that what you're calling thoughts, these analytic feelings, they're the ones that are about the feeling as such. You know, analytic thoughts aren't just taking the data in directly, they're feeling the feelings.
You know, sorry, I've got lots of stuff rattling next to me here. What it means is that your body, particularly the internal milieu of your body, your somatic responses inside your body, the biochemistry, the way that your sphincters are operating, all the really deep internal stuff is constantly, you know, rearranging itself and forming itself into kind of patterns and responding to the environment it's in and responding to other elements within its own functioning.
And I would like to point out, not to take this as something that I need to go point by point and go, see, you're wrong, but, you know, insofar as it affects the argument I've been making, I just want to point out those are kinds of things that happen in all biological systems. Now, you could say that noticing them is the part that is the actual feeling. But I find it funny to say that, because what you're saying is that if you didn't have nerves, but you had the same body and all these stress chemicals and these reactions, your heart's starting to pump faster, all of these reactions that when you have neurology you sense, and it makes up a feeling of panic, because you don't have the neurons, that body isn't in panic. But if you hooked in some neurons, you'd feel it, and suddenly it would be in panic, the body in the very same state. So to me, it's a little bit like saying, you know, putting saying the reason that the, you know, coyote exists is because somebody took a picture of it. It's the camera that makes it exist. You know what I'm saying? So I agree that it adds something to consciousness, and it is very much a reflective part where you can do much higher sort of logic with emotions as your basic object. But yeah, okay, so you go into more detail.
And that information from your body is sent into a different part of your brain. So your brain is kind of perceiving what your body is doing.
Okay, now I love this point because it's hard enough for me to argue that we perceive in general, but, you know, like I say, you only know the subjective experience for yourself. Everybody else, it's what you perceive of their behavior that gives you this idea. But the fact is, you actually only, you only witness yourself as well. So you have subjective feelings and whatnot, but you're witnessing them. You are also an observer. That you are just fundamentally an observer. No, anything you get information of, even if it's of yourself and as direct as possible, it's in this observer mode, which is interesting. In other words, we pretend we know ourselves, and really we have to collect evidence, just like with anything. You don't automatically know yourself.
And it's that perception of what your body's doing that is, in terms that people have spoken about, is this thing called feeling. Damasio calls this bodily stuff emotions. And I think it's slightly confusing that, because we often use emotions to mean feeling, don't we? But he makes that distinction. There's these entirely embodied things going on, and then there's the perception, the conscious perception of those things, which is the feeling. I'm not sure if he says conscious perceptions, actually. Anyway, perceptions are those things that is the feeling. And you can kind of test it, I suppose, when you get a distinct feeling, not a pain, but an emotional feeling, like anger. I think William James does this. He invites you to imagine what anger would be like if you took away some of the bodily responses. You know, so if you took away the feeling of pressure in your face, the blood pressure in your face, you imagine that disappearing. If you imagine the tenseness and the tension in your muscles, if you imagine that going away, and you imagine the knot in your stomach and the kind of curling over your shoulders, so you just strip away these embodied responses one by one, and then imagine what anger feels like without those things. And what you find is that once you've taken all the bodily stuff out, there isn't, anger kind of loses its anchors, really. There's no...
I think that's very interesting. I agree with that example. I think there's a couple different kinds of things going on, and one of them is right what we're talking about. This is what I'm saying. Animals, insects, and even plants can do those things. They can feel distress. They've got the things going on in them that are the type of things that we perceive. Now, they don't have the extra mechanism to perceive them that's going on. So what I would call, panic is going on, but they don't know it's going on. They're just experiencing it going on. So they have the panic, but they don't have the knowledge, hey, I'm panicking. So they know they're experiencing, they are experiencing panic, but they're not experiencing knowledge of it. Okay? Because if we could attach our neurons, I'll just spread some extra neurons and plug them in there, we would look at that system and go, it's panicking. So why would it not be panicking? It's just like I said earlier. How would my pointing my camera at that thing change whether I really want to call that panic? That's why I make this strong distinction between the self-consciousness kind of things, which is what we associate with this word a lot. But we don't just use the word that way. We use the word this way I want to use it. Conscious of a thing. I'm conscious, I'm reacting of it. That animal's conscious of my presence. Okay, but when we're talking about just our glorious notions of ourself and philosophy, often, it has this more, kind of a very higher functioning idea associated with it, which is the self-consciousness. It's the fact that not only are we thinking about an apple, but we're thinking about the fact that we're thinking about an apple, and like right now, I'm thinking about the thinking we do about thinking about apples. So we're, we're many more echelons of complexity than I suspect you would get in what some people call the lower life forms. But basically, it's going through the same kind of system state that in ourselves we call, some of the familiar emotions. Now, I'm not saying everything feels pain. Some animal could easily be created that, it doesn't feel pain. It has some other way to survive. I'm just saying it's got to feel something in order to do what we call survive and have it be survival. Okay, not just a sustained reaction, but a survival, a particular kind of sustained reaction.
So we're not thinking beings that feel, we are feeling beings that think.
See, that's what I believe, and I also just add on top of that we're just feeling beings, and that thoughts are just certain kinds of feelings. You could call them rarefied is the way that I would acknowledge their higher abstraction, but I don't like to call them metaphysical or anything like that. They're still very tangible. Now, the last thing I would like to say is on this thermostat idea. I really want to challenge you on to be serious. It's a different thing. To be serious, if you're watching this, my question to you at this point is, do you acknowledge that I've answered your question about differentiation? I allow for an infinite amount of differentiation. I say that the differentiation is in what we perceive and be aware of, not if we do. But in your case, it's really this issue about the thermostat. I have trouble accepting that you're really going to press, and more people are in the comments of one of my latest videos, pressing this idea that no, it really is simple, and somebody says you could just easily write a program much more complex. It's easy to make a robot more complex than an amoeba. What? I mean, start with the Wikipedia, because no. And so that's where I would challenge you, is like, you really want to hold on to that. I see how you could give that up and still have your same position. I think in the end of this, if I convince you of everything I believe on this subject, it's not really going to affect what you believe, because you can still say, hey, okay, Piero's convinced me they have some sort of perception. It could be called awareness or even consciousness. It's legit. I have to share the word. But basically, I'm a poet and an artist, and when I think of these things, I think of the rich human experience, and it's not really, emotion or feelings to me without all of this neurological and even particularly human component. And that's fine. I would accept that. I would just want to say that, okay, if you say something like that, it's like somebody with really good taste. Let's say the only kind of higher cuisine in the world was French cuisine. It didn't even have to compete with the other cuisines of the world. It was either that or, eating mud. Well, not mud. Eating, something that you could live off but you didn't enjoy eating. And someone says, well, there really isn't any other French cuisine. That's any other kind of cuisine or food. It's not even food if it's not French food. That's what you would be saying. In other words, you haven't made a distinction of kind, but really that you, of course, as a human being, have kind of a higher standard and needs. You have human needs. So when you really think about these things, that they have to be the full ones. And that's the kind of the area that I'd be going in terms of having sort of something that I'm arguing for with you. And I think a lot of it at this point, not overall totally, but at this point hinges on this issue about really would you persist in trying to say an amoeba. I mean, the way an amoeba moves, all the different things that it can process and interact with, and it doesn't even need to be in a liquid. It brings its own bubble of liquid, which is basically a liquid kind of sea, float around in the sea kind of design, but it just managed to get a membrane to do more than that. It's a pretty amazing device, and no, we have no robots or thermostats that are quite as amazing. Anyway, I'm wondering what you're thinking, and thanks very much for the thought-provoking video, and take care.